So then we have the next question, the big one. Is Richard Allen bridge guy? I don't know, and neither do you.
You need to shut the fuck up!
Running again, crushing my brain with the candlelight. Losing my breath, losing myself, dreams are out of sight. Stop struggling against my demons. Stop taking life as fiction. Let it burn, burn, burn. Burn the pain, burn the lies, burn the fear inside myself. And burn it all again. It's the right time to escape this cage I've been locked in for so long. It's not where I belong. Let it burn, burn, burn into the ground.
Bob Ruff. Bless his heart and his seemingly unwavering ability to be spectacularly wrong about true crime cases. If his deep dives into the West Memphis 3 and Adnan Syed sagas are any indication, both of which he championed as wrongful convictions, much to the chagrin of actual facts, then his track record is less independent investigator and more consistent misinterpreter. And wouldn't you know it, our intrepid truth seeker is back, stumbling headfirst into the Richard Allen case with such grace of a newborn giraffe on ice skates. Now, to be fair, a concept I employ loosely when discussing Bobby, he did admit his foray into the Delphi case wasn't the full-blown I've cracked the code routine that he usually pulls, and instead said he's going to just give his opinion. But since I've dipped my toes into the murky waters of the Richard Allen trial and other related Delphi topics, it almost felt like a duty to comment on his latest misadventure. You see, giving an opinion is fine, but not all opinions are built the same. You have smart, well-informed opinions, and then you have ignorant opinions. And Bob falls under the latter category, and I'm gonna prove it. Now, I haven't covered the Richard Allen case to my usual exhaustive coverage because some truly competent individuals have already covered it with such breathtaking thoroughness that I genuinely wouldn't know how to improve upon their work. If anything, I have to defer to them. I'm talking about people like Fig Solves and Tom Webster. Fig has meticulously laid out every single detail with such precision that anyone still clinging to the Allen is innocent fantasy after watching his content, well, those people are either operating with a severe cognitive deficit or they're a blatant liar, desperately trying to ignore the glaring truth. And Tom Webster. He actually attended the trial and was instrumental in bringing us the actual evidence for us to review. I'm talking about the chilling police interviews, the damning phone calls, and some of the exhibits. Seriously, if you want the unvarnished factual truth about Richard Allen's case, skip the amateur hour and go directly to Fig Solves and Tom Webster's channel. Their knowledge dwarfs Bob Ruff's by several intellectual galaxies. Honestly, I'm not sure if Bob's still doing stand-up comedy, but his podcast is a masterclass in unintentional humor on its own. That is, if you could stomach his consistent and profound wrongness, repeatedly solving the already solved and doing it while wearing the midlife crisis leather jacket. Okay, alright, the last part I made up, but it's what I imagine when he's botching these solved cases. In a just world, a concept clearly foreign to our reality, we'd let go of these cases once they're solved. The family should be afforded the space to heal, however imperfectly, to navigate their lives as best they can. But individuals like Bobby and his fabricated pursuit of truth and justice actively deny them that peace with his bullshit podcast. He has no right to speak for anyone. Did he even bother to speak with Abby and Libby's family who firmly believe in Richard Allen's guilt? It's shit like this that the likes of Bob Ruff deserve no critical mercy. People like him have cultivated my contempt. With that said, let's get started and review Bobby's ill-informed opinion. This review is in reference to Truth and Justice's Season 16, Episode 21, entitled Rick Allen, Guilty or Innocent. Or maybe it's Richard Allen, Guilty or Innocent. I don't know. I'll link it to the description page for anyone who wants to waste an hour of their life and listen to it. It's up to you. So let's buckle up for the usual Bob Ruff experience. First, you'll have to wade through an ocean of his commercials, and once you've navigated through that hot garbage, he graces us with a disclaimer. Despite his deep dive, and I use that term loosely, into Richard Allen's case, he won't actually be taking it on and reinvestigating it. Oh, hallelujah, right? Then his superiority complex kicks in, and he condescendingly informs us that everyone else, the peasants who actually have opinions, are wrong for leaning definitively towards Allen's guilt or innocence. Apparently, we don't possess the sacred facts to make such assessments. Bob conveniently forgets that's not how convictions work. As I painstakingly explained in my last live, it's about beyond a reasonable doubt, not beyond all doubt. But hey, if you missed that little nugget of wisdom, feel free to catch the replay. Of course, Bob's self-imposed ignorance isn't going to stop him from sharing his oh-so-valuable opinion. He's about to pontificate on this case that he just admitted in his own mind we don't have all the facts on. Predictably, he paraphrases this by whining about how half of us will be frothing with rage at his pronouncements. And naturally, anyone who dares disagree is instantly labeled a troll. A remarkably lazy and unimaginative argument. He then regales us with a tale of death threats against his children via snail mail. Truly reprehensible. Right? I agree with that. I condemn that, just as I condemn the threats my own family had to endure. But his dramatic portrayal of victimhood conveniently overlooks the fact that this kind of vile behavior sadly comes with the territory of putting yourself out there. Hate to burst his bubble, but he's not some unique martyr in this regard. But wait, there's more. The supposed justification for his unsolicited opinion? Thousands of his devoted followers demanding it. You'd think such a weighty request would come with a corresponding sense of responsibility to, be certain before spouting off. A reasonable person might think, perhaps since I lack complete information, offering an opinion would be irresponsible, potentially swaying others based on incomplete data. I wouldn't want any of that on my conscience. But no. Bob's ego requires an outlet. He must bestow his wisdom upon the masses. He then boasts about his experts and just stops short of calling his upcoming spiel a conclusion, opting instead for the more slippery opinion. A clever little semantic dodge that will undoubtedly allow him to backtrack later if his pronouncements crumble under scrutiny. Crafty. After some more drivel that we're just going to go ahead and skip over, he finally gets around to the crux of the matter, why he believes Richard Allen is innocent. So he looks at the state's three key points of evidence. 1. Richard Allen admitting he was at the crime scene. 2. The unspent round found that couldn't exclude Allen's gun. And 3. The confessions. Bobby is going to approach this with his profound wisdom that Richard Allen is presumed innocent. Oh, the staggering originality. It's almost as if that's the foundational principle of, the entire legal system, the one that the actual jury, who were, present, also adhered to. But of course, we're not dealing with your average Joe Six-Pack juror. No. We're talking about Bob Ruff, a titan of intellect, a true crime superhero soaring above the pedestrian understanding of us mere mortals. So our Caped Crusader ponders the weighty question. Was Richard Allen at the bridge that fateful day? His groundbreaking conclusion? Yes. And apparently, Allen volunteering to meet with Doolin is some kind of not guilty gold star. Plus his simplistic interpretation of complex human behavior. Allen's wife knew he was lurking around the Monon Bridge that day, which is why she nudged him to come forward. But let's also not forget the charming way he volunteered, refusing a police visit to his humble abode and declining a trip to the station, opting instead for a rendezvous outside a grocery store. And isn't it fascinating how Bobby conveniently omits the detail about Alan's wife recounting his initial denial of even being on the bridge that day, only admitting to being on the trails? The things we selectively omit. Then comes the million-dollar question, the one that requires the deductive prowess of Sherlock Holmes. Is Alan Bridge Guy? His profound answer? I don't know, and neither do you. Delivered with the kind of arrogant certainty that suggests he believes the rest of us are drooling simpletons. This, my friends, is where Bob's grasp of the concept of totality of evidence and, basic logic collapses like a castle of playing cards. Let's break it down for the intellectually challenged, shall we? When does Richard initially place himself in the vicinity of the crime? Well, initially he said 1 p.m. to 3 p.m., but I think a few days later it was 1:30 to 3:30 p.m., right? A nice broad window of opportunity. And how do we know he was there? Because his trusty 2016 Ford Focus was captured on the Hoosier Harvest Store video heading west on County Road 300 North at 1:27 p.m. What happens next in the timeline? Well, at about 1:40 p.m., four other girls have a little encounter with a certain bridge guy, identified through the now infamous photo and video. And wouldn't you know it, Richard Allen himself confirms seeing these very same girls on the trail. But that's just a coincidence. Nothing to see here, right? Fast forward to 1:53 p.m. Betsy Blair spots Bridge Guy on Platform 1, and guess who else conveniently places himself on Platform 1, claiming to be gazing intently at the local aquatic life? Richard Allen. Oh, and he just so happened to be wearing clothes remarkably similar to the description of Bridge Guy. But again, more coincidences just happening to pile up. Around 1:55 p.m., Betsy passes our young victims, Abby and Libby, heading towards the very bridge where Bridge Guy was last seen. So, are we really expected to believe that Alan spontaneously sprouted wings and flew off? He claims he never saw Abby and Libby. So, instead of simply retracing his steps, which would have conveniently put him directly in their path, he decided to take an impromptu detour through the dense forest back to his car? Only the truly gullible, or perhaps Bob Ruff, would swallow that ludicrous scenario. Then comes 2:13 p.m. Abby and Libby encounter Bridge Guy wearing a dark jacket and jeans on the Monon High Bridge, captured on a 43-second video. So what does a functioning brain deduce from all of this? It's reasonably inferable that Bridge Guy is in fact Richard Allen. He puts himself at the scene. The timeline aligns. The clothing descriptions match. The location is the same. This isn't rocket science. It's called common sense. You don't need a crystal clear facial recognition scan to connect the dots when the suspect himself has helpfully drawn the lines for you with his own words, his own timeline, and his own presence at the precise time and location. The witnesses might not have seen his face clearly, but their accounts combined with Allen's admissions paint a picture so damning that only willful blindness, or perhaps a podcast host with a knack of getting shit wrong, could fail to see it. Let me calm down. So, what happens next? Bobby is about to take a steaming dump all over the mountain of circumstantial evidence. All because his oh-so-special data can't definitively print Richard Allen equals bridge guy in big bold letters. Never mind the jury who actually, saw the evidence and heard the testimony. Despite them, no, Bob's got his own theories, conveniently plucked from thin air. He even drags the FBI's probable cause affidavit to search Ron Logan's home into this, clutching at the straw that the FBI once thought Logan looked similar to Bridge Guy. And let's go over that. Oh, the FBI. Bob speaks of them with such reverence, and forgive me if I don't bow at the altar of the almighty Bureau. This is the same crack team that initially suspected the Atlanta Olympic bombing on hero Richard Jewell. Remember that little debacle? How about their brilliant profiling that pegged the DC Beltway sniper as a white guy? Remember that one? And let's not even open up Pandora's box, that is the Atlanta child killer case. Bob also fawns over Jim Clemente, an expert who got slapped with a lawsuit for his expert opinion that Burke Ramsey offed his sister, John Bonet. So excuse my skepticism, but my all over the FBI's infallibility is somewhat tempered. They're hardly the flawless deities Bob seems to think that they are. But undeterred by reality, Bob clings to these infallible expert analyses, particularly their guess that the guy on the bridge was 6'3", conveniently taller than Richard Allen. Apparently, Bob's brain is incapable of processing information unless another self-proclaimed expert whispers sweet nothings of different height into his ear. He also parrots some garbage from a forensic psychologist because, those are always reliable, right? Who magically concluded, just like Inspector Bobby, that Abby and Libby had somewhat prearranged a rendezvous with Bridge Guy. Never mind the complete and utter lack of any factual basis for such a claim, rendering their expert opinion about as valid as a sturdy chocolate teapot. But of course, this also puts Richard Allen yet again into the not guilty column for Bobby. Everything else, just internet nonsense. Apparently, screw you, jury. You simpletons, you just couldn't grasp the nuanced brilliance of Bobby Ruff's and his hand-picked gaggle of experts. Bunch of dummies. Next up in Bob's intellectual demolition derby, the shocking revelation that there's no DNA, hairs, or fingerprints directly linking Richard Allen to the crime. Well, slap my forehead and call me stupid. I guess that means the girl spontaneously combusted or the mischievous poltergeist was the culprit, right? This isn't an argument, it's a pathetic appeal to the CSI effect. Newsflash for Bob. Only a minuscule percentage of these kinds of crimes yield usable DNA pointing directly to a suspect. About 10%, I believe. So by Bob's logic, the other 90% are just figments of our imagination. What kind of brain-dead reasoning is that? Which brings me to the unspent shell casing, a piece of evidence that it's apparently meaningless to Bobby. Let's hear his opinion on it.
Now, the next question is there anything forensically linking Allen to the crime scene? Now, I'm not going to beat a dead horse here, but the simple answer is no. No DNA, no hairs, no fingerprints. All we have is that unspent shell casing. And as loud and proud as some of you will argue that the bullet puts Allen at the crime scene, I promise you that if it were you or a loved one in the hot seat, you would absolutely not accept that test performed in that way only to land on sufficient agreement of 1 out of 10 shells, and that one shell was fired through the gun when the control round wasn't. When the gun owned by the man who lived right next to the crime scene also couldn't be excluded due to sufficient agreement, and the expert conceded on the stand that likely any gun of that make and model could have had the same sufficient agreement, I just don't think you'd be saying, well, my loved one must have did it because it's his bullet at the scene. That's nonsense. The entire bullet controversy is nonsense. Now, it doesn't land in the not guilty column to me in the sense that it's counter evidence. By counter evidence, I mean it leans towards his innocence. It's in the not guilty column for me because it doesn't even come close to falling into the guilty category.
Right. That's Bob's warped reality. Now, let's cleanse our ears with the soothing sound of actual common sense. Take it away, Figgy.
Did Rick Allen own a .40 caliber Sig Sauer capable of producing the unique extraction marks on the unspent round found between the bodies? Yes, ballistics testing confirmed it. The bullet had been cycled through Allen's Sig Sauer. That unspent round came from his gun. The unspent .40 caliber round found between the victims is one of the most damning pieces of evidence against Richard Allen because it places him at the crime scene. There's no other evidence that was found that places anyone else at the crime scene. That's why it's so significant. And this is what they call a nexus, ladies and gentlemen. When a bullet or cartridge is cycled through a gun, whether it's fired or not, it picks up tiny, unique marks from the gun's ejector and extractor mechanisms.
Different ways of conducting that type of analysis. If a bullet is fired out of a gun, then you can conduct an analysis on the projectile itself as it twists and comes out of a barrel. There may be different nicks and scrapes and things on the bullet. But any bullet casing that's been ejected out of a semi-automatic handgun, whether that gun has been fired or not, it is pushed into the bottom part of the barrel, and then when the slide is racked and the bullet's ejected, even if it hasn't been fired, there's still an extractor that grabs the edge of that bullet, that flips it out, and that process often, not always, but often leaves marks and dents, and those marks and dents can be very specific to the weapon that it came out of. So even if it hasn't been fired, in a laboratory, they can go back, put a similar type of shell casing in it in a laboratory environment, eject that round, and then compare the two.
Those microscopic marks are like fingerprints, and firing the weapon in a controlled lab actually makes those marks easier to see without altering the original signature. That's standard forensic science. It's exactly how it's supposed to be done. Melissa Oberg, the Indiana State Police firearms examiner who conducted the analysis, has examined over 66,000 firearms across her 17-year career. Guess how accurate she is? 100%. She's never made a mistaken identification, not once. Oberg used a rigorous 3-level forensic process following ASTM and NIJ standards. This is why she's always 100% accurate. She concluded with certainty that Allen's 6 Sauer cycled the unspent round. No other gun, not in Carroll County, not anywhere else, left those exact marks. In her own words, I was able to identify the pistol as having cycled the cartridge. Her findings were later independently verified by a second expert. This is direct evidence, physical proof that Richard Allen had his gun out during the murders. Let's also not forget that in one of Rick Allen's confessions, he admitted to pulling his gun on the girls and doing something with it. The bullet confirms his confession. The science confirms the story. And for the planted a magic bullet crowd, let's be real. The round was logged, bagged, and stored under strict supervised chain of custody. The defense even cross-examined Oberg and had full access to the report and offered zero credible rebuttal. All they did was look at pictures of the shell casing in the gun. The bullet was a match. And no, this isn't junk science. This is good evidence.
So, according to Bobby, conclusions reached by other experts, unless they align with his predetermined narrative, are utterly worthless. You genuinely cannot make this level of bullshit up. What happened to blindly trusting the experts, Bobby? Oh, wait, that's only when they tell you what you want to hear versus what you need to hear. And I wish I could say I was happy about the brief intermission for a commercial about some bullshit miracle diet product called First Form and how it's a game changer. No. A calorie deficit is a game changer. And you know what? I'm so sick and tired of these stupid commercials on these true crime podcasts. They're utterly ridiculous. Well, you know what? Two can play at this sponsorship game. I've got a sponsor of my own. Hit it! And now a word from our sponsor. Are you tired of feeling like you're stuck in a cold case? Well, I've got the solution for you. Introducing Murder Mist, the ultimate body spray for the true crime enthusiast. With its unique blend of crime scene scents, including notes of damp earth and mysterious fog, Murder Mist will transport you to the gritty world of true crime. And the best part? It's only $19.99 a bottle. Don't wait any longer. Order now and get a free crime scene tape measurer, perfect for measuring out your coffee table, or marking off your crime scene reconstruction diorama. Use the code TrueCrime15 at checkout to get 15% off your first order. Don't wait. Let the mist bring out the killer in you.
Murder Mist, it's a killer scent. Mysterious and ominous, it's heaven sent. Damp earth and fog, the deadly blend. Murder Mist, it's a true crime trend. Spritz it off, you feel like a pro. Solving crimes, wherever you go.
All right. Where were we in this glorious unraveling of Bob's intellectual tapestry? Ah, yes. Wading through more of his steaming pile of hot takes on the Richard Allen case. Now, he's bravely ventured into the realm of police interrogations, a topic that apparently leaves Bob utterly spellbound. The fact that Allen didn't confess to being the big bad wolf in the mere total of 2 hours is, in Bob's world, either proof of Allen's unparalleled mastery of deception or an insurmountable obstacle to understanding how his own damn bullet ended up at the murder scene. Which, to anyone operating with a fraction of common sense, knows is utterly ludicrous. Did Josh Powell spontaneously burst into tears and confess to dispatching his wife, Susan? Nope. How about his creepy dad or equally unhelpful brother? The entire planet with a functioning brain cell knows Josh murdered Susan, and then, for his grand finale, murdered his own children before offing himself. A clear demonstration of his capacity for truly heinous acts. Did Brooke Hawkes ever raise a hand and say, "Yep, I had something to do with my wife, Crystal Rogers' disappearance"? Nope. So let's dispense with this utterly naive notion that a suspect immediately confessing is some kind of legal requirement or a sign of innocence. It's not unusual. It's reality. It's another lazy, simplistic argument from our favorite doofus podcaster. But despite the glaringly obvious realities of human behavior in criminal investigations, Bob, in his infinite wisdom, oversimplifies these interrogations and neatly slots them into his ever-growing not guilty column. But fear not, logical impaired listeners. Bob has once again outsourced his critical thinking to another forensic psychologist who will undoubtedly validate his pre-existing bias. And isn't it just fascinating how Bob conveniently glosses over that incredibly awkward moment in the recorded conversation where Alan's own wife flat out says, "But you told me you weren't on the bridge that day," only for Alan to suddenly pivot into a heartfelt declaration of his undying love. Yeah, nothing suspicious there at all, according to Bob's highly selective memory. All right, let's dissect Bobby's latest heap of bullshit, shall we? Apparently, what sends shivers down his spine is the notion that the entire case hinged on that single unspent bullet. Wrong again, Captain Oblivious. Alan's own admission, neatly collaborated by witness accounts and the timeline, were also rather significant factors in securing his arrest. The bullet was a piece of the puzzle that they needed, sure, but it wasn't the whole damn jigsaw. It's the totality of evidence, a concept that consistently eludes his grasp. So no, it wasn't just about one fucking bullet, as he eloquently puts it. And you actually want to know what is actually scary, at least to me? Bobby's monumental stupidity. He genuinely said, and I swear I'm not making this up, that Alan driving to Delphi to tell his story that he was at the scene that day somehow makes him look innocent. This laughing stock of a human being doesn't even grasp the basic geography of the case. Richard Allen lived in Delphi, both then and after. This isn't some heroic trek. It's him admitting to being at the scene of the crime that happened in his own backyard. The sheer idiocracy of this whole thing and his statement deserves a lifetime ban from podcasting and a mandatory clown college enrollment. Oh, but the comedic stylings of Bobby doesn't end there. He then drones on about how Allen's electronics didn't reveal anything incriminating. Well, Sherlock, perhaps that's because the one electronic that mattered, his cell phone, during the time of the murders, conveniently vanished from his collection of other past devices. Either Bobby is blissfully unaware of this rather crucial detail, or he conveniently omitted it to prop up his flimsy arguments for his legion of lemmings. Either way, it's breathtakingly irresponsible. And because why not? Bobby also decides to showcase his profound misunderstandings of due process. It's a reoccurring theme with him, like his consistent wrongness, so it barely warrants further discussion. Yet, that didn't stop his sanctimonious spewing about us who believe Richard Allen is guilty, and we're sacrificing our morals and our beliefs to defend our position. A truly rich statement coming from that walking, talking, open asshole. The pot calling the kettle black. He then helpfully reiterates that his rambling is just his opinion, and anyone who disagrees also just has an opinion. Except in this case, Bobby, one side is based on a guilty verdict rooted in fact and law, and the other is the desperate bleating of someone who refuses to admit they're wrong. It's not a matter of equally valid opinions when one has a little thing called a conviction attached to it. The jury got it right, and you, Bobby, are wrong. Finally, we get to the part where Bobby proclaims is the only evidence worthy of debate. The confessions. And can you guess his earth-shattering conclusion? Any guesses at all? Is there a pattern you can detect? I'll give you a hint. Prepare for more of Bobby's profound wrongness. So, Bobby has no qualms with the recorded phone calls being played at trial. Then he puffs out his chest, boasting about his decade-long deep dive into the murky world of false confessions and wrongful convictions, triumphantly declaring that false confessions are indeed a thing. Well, congratulations, dipshit. There's always an exception to any rule, but that hardly makes the exception the rule itself. Every case hinges on its own specific circumstances, but for Bobby, a confession apparently carries the weight of a feather in a hurricane. Surprise, surprise. It seems our Bobby has a severe case of the CSI effect, which, as I've already patiently explained, is when people who watch crime shows like CSI develop unrealistic expectations about forensic science in real life. They might think every crime scene should have DNA evidence, fingerprints, and instant lab results, and they might be less likely to believe other types of evidence if those CSI magic tools aren't present. Basically, TV makes them think real crimes are solved faster, easier, and more scientific than it actually is. And trust me, based on the intellectual vomit spewing from Bobby's podcast, he's a prime subscriber. And according to Bobby's warped logic, these phone confessions are meaningless because they lack the when, where, why, and how. Apparently, the concept that a man might be hesitant to recount gruesome details to his wife and mother is beyond his comprehension. Shocking, I know. But the fact that Allen felt compelled to unburden himself of his guilt to the closest confidants, that's compelling stuff for anyone with a functioning brain, and it's also common sense that he wouldn't want to get into those dirty details with them. But hold on to your hats, folks, because this is where Bobby's train of thought derails spectacularly. He claims, with the unwavering certainty of someone who hasn't bothered to check the actual facts, that Richard Allen was in a state of psychosis and heavily medicated with Haldol during those phone calls. And that's partially true. There's a lot of misinformation here. For someone with such a keen eye for details, Bobby seems to have conveniently misplaced the calendar. Allen wasn't even given Haldol until April 14th, 2023. And let's rewind, shall we? He confessed in prison before that, starting with his written desire to confess to the warden on March 3rd. Was he hallucinating then? How about his confession to his wife on April 3rd? Or to a correction officer on April 5th? Nope. The peak of Allen's psychosis was around April 14th, and by May 2nd, those symptoms had subsided. Yet, the confessions continued. He confessed to Dr. Walla on May 3rd, providing those pesky details Bobby claims are missing but conveniently ignores when they actually appear. And he confessed to his wife again on May 10th, to his mother on May 17th, and to his wife again on June 11th. And guess what delightful medical condition Allen didn't have during that entire period? Anyone? Psychosis. But the crazy spells. What about the crazy spells? What about them? Allen was reportedly telling others he was faking it, dropping the act when the guards weren't looking or when he wanted something. How did Bobby's supposedly superior intellect completely whiff on that rather significant detail? But of course, Bobby dismisses all of it. Meaningless, he declares. Another tally mark in his ever-growing not guilty column. I mean, give me a break. And then there's Dr. Walla's account of Allen's confession. Instead of actually examining the details he so desperately claims to seek, Bobby resorts to attacking other aspects of her character, none of which negate the specific information she relayed, information that could only have come from the killer himself. Take the white van, for example. Bobby claims the owner, Brad Weber, couldn't have been driving his van down the road at the time of the murders because he was busy servicing ATMs. But somehow, in Bobby's convoluted mind, Weber changed his story to align with Walla's narrative. Never mind that the jury, despite their supposed intellectual inferior ways, weighted this and had to have found Weber's account credible. Oh, and the fact that Walla participated in online discussions somehow diminishes her credibility to Bobby because the white van theory emerged before her testimony and considers that suspect, well, that's misleading. What Bobby conveniently ignores is that the white van sighting theory on social media didn't place it on the private road at the exact time Allen claimed to have seen it, rendering Bobby's point utterly bogus. So the white van theory and the fact that that was mentioned in social media accounts, be it Facebook or what have you, doesn't debunk anything. Bobby even fixates on where Allen thought he ejected the unspent round. And honestly, who cares? Who cares? It's a reasonable assumption that Allen believed it fell out in a certain location. It doesn't automatically make him a liar. But no, despite the jury's verdict, Bobby deems Walla as an untrustworthy witness. And to arrive at that conclusion, Bobby would also have to believe that Walla and Weber are somehow in cahoots together. He's so fixated on his unrealistic CSI fantasy that he's willing to disregard any direct confession as a false one. The man is a colossal moron. So, in conclusion, the idiot's current, deeply insightful opinion is that Richard Allen is not guilty. Shocking. Absolutely groundbreaking. Glad to know it. But the fact remains. Richard Allen is guilty. Period. Like it, don't like it, learn to love it. And for those of you who have actually followed this case and understand the convincing guilt of Richard Allen, If you're feeling a surge of frustration towards this buffoon and his self-proclaimed opinions, imagine how those following the other cases he covers must feel. This is a man so profoundly dense that he probably set himself on fire to cure a cold. That's the level of logic he applies to these serious criminal cases. This, my friends, is just a small taste of the utter idiocy we're dealing with here. Anyways, thank you all for listening. If you've listened to the end, I appreciate it. And again, I highly recommend you go to Tom Webster's channel and go to Fig Solve's channel, and I'll link them in the description page. And like I said earlier, I will link Bob Ruff's podcast episode on this. I'm not afraid of anyone looking at the other side of it and hearing what he has to say. If you got an hour to waste, go ahead and do it. If you have the patience to do it, God bless you. Anyway, I'm Rick. This is Burn After Reading, and I'll catch your ass down the road.
Burn the lies, burn the fear inside myself, and burn it all again. To right time to escape.